Hi guys! Nintendo recently finally unveiled the Switch 2 edition of Super Mario Bros. Wonder, which comes with what seems to be a humongous amount of DLC content. So, as probably the most qualified person to talk about the niche details of anything Super Mario Bros. Wonder related, today I'm going to do an in-depth analysis of the trailer to point out things you likely missed, and also at the end give my personal thoughts on what's been shown and discuss the modding potential of all this stuff. So without further ado, let's analyze a 2-minute trailer for like 30 minutes, here we go. The trailer starts much like the original game's reveal with a vignette around a talking flower. And the first thing you may notice here is that, just like in Super Mario Party Jamboree TV and Mario Tennis Fever, talking flowers in this upgrade sound a bit different because they seem to be voiced by Patrick Zeitz.
What'll it be?
Whereas in the original game they were voiced by Mick Wingert.
So you can get over there.
I think he does an admirable job mimicking the original performance, but having listened to the previous voice lines for dozens of hours, I can easily tell the difference, so it'll take some getting used to. There are plenty of lines throughout this trailer that were also in the original game but have been re-recorded, so I wonder if all the old voice lines have been replaced, or if things will be inconsistent between the old and new content. Either way, the Switch 2 edition logo is revealed through this 9.5 tile wide question mark block, which I assume isn't an element that will actually appear in-game, because why would it? Also, with this being our first in-game footage, this is also where we get to see that, as far as I can tell, it runs at native 4K resolution. Both the meetup in Bellabel Park name and logo are kinda strange. This big new Super Mario Bros. Logo style blob is flower shaped like so many things in the Flower Kingdom, and the same goes for the titular bells. Also, I think it's funny that this exact same plus was used for New Super Luigi U 12 years ago. Okay, let's talk about the interesting stuff now, Bellabel Park. The voiceover says that this plaza has been discovered in the Flower Kingdom, which suggests that this is supposed to be a sort of ancient place, which is supported by the fact that many of the structures we see here are slightly ruined. The area is split into 3 sections, one with green grass, which is called Local Multiplayer Plaza, one with yellow grass, which is basically all about one shop, and this courtyard area, which I think is dedicated to online multiplayer. Why? Well, firstly, Professor Connect, which is the name of this thing, which allows you to go online in the original game, is right here, and also the fact that the entire area is themed after it, with antenna-shaped flowers, including this massive beanstalk one. And considering this other area is called Local Multiplayer Plaza, it's only natural to assume its counterpart is Online Multiplayer Plaza. Okay, but why is this divide in place? Well, remember how online works in the original game. Although you're technically playing together, the version of each level the player interacts with is entirely their own, meaning it's impossible to stand on the same platform, or to push each other into lava, or to do any of the other local multiplayer minigames we see in this trailer. So instead it seems like the DLC will feature unique online-only minigames that are designed around not being able to physically interact within the same space. But currently all we can do is speculate, since the trailer actually doesn't show a single one of these modes. All of these are fenced off in this wide shot with a sign placed in front of each, but this other clip confirms that this changes once you go online, since now there's poplins in front of each game, just like in the other plaza. Before we focus on the minigames we do see in the trailer, there's a few more things I want to point out about Bellabel Park as a whole. These golden bells are interesting. They look suspiciously like super bells, though they feature a flower icon, but since they seem to be scattered around slightly harder to reach areas that may require a few jumps to get to, I assume they're actually collectibles you can gather by running around the world map. This Poplin marching band is interesting. Their dark green color is new, and they fit in with Wonder's very music-focused theming, but I have no idea what kind of purpose they could serve. Also, the yellow grass area features a split path that doesn't just lead to the 2 plazas, but also down and off screen. Now, the fun theory with this would be that there is a third yet to be revealed plaza, maybe one that focuses on single player minigames or something, but in reality I think this is just the direction from which you enter this part of the world map. And I suppose that begs the question, where in the world is Bellabel Park located? The original game went out of its way to show the interconnectedness of all its different environments, so I assume this new world will be contextualized in the same way. So I have two theories as to where the park might fit in. Although these mossy blue hills are a new asset, they're definitely reminiscent of the swamp area of Pipe Rock Plateau, so maybe this location is connected to the game's first world. That would be supported by the way this entire area features structures that resemble the Flower Kingdom's castle, which is in the same area. Another idea I like is that this place could be directly below the lowest layer of the special world. There is a teal environment below this floating flower already, and Bellabel Park features more explicit flower theming than most of Wonder's normal worlds, so I think that would make sense. Anyways, let's talk about the main event now, the minigames. As the trailer itself explains, these are split into the co-op and versus categories. And it seems like they are also grouped that way on the world map, with the versus games down close to the entrance and the co-op ones up here. The fast cash mode seems identical to New Super Mario Bros. Wii and U's Coin Battle, with the players competing to collect the most coins in remixed versions of the original game's levels. This is the level Here Come the Hoppos, but this talking flower is new, and so is this Wonder Bud that spawns a bunch of coins. Also, in this scene, and throughout all of the minigame footage shown in the trailer, the screen is zoomed out more than it usually is in the original game. Even in multiplayer, Wonder almost always features a screen size of 15.5 by 27.5 tiles, but in Bellabel Park, levels are shown at 20 by 35.5 tiles, so it's zoomed out nearly 30%. Unlike Wonder, New Super Mario Bros. Wii and U's camera would also sometimes zoom out far during multiplayer, and since, apart from on the world map, this trailer footage also lacks the original game's crown symbol that indicates which character has control of the camera, I assume the entire camera system will function more similarly to that of the New Super Mario Bros. Games here. The next shot of the same level is interesting, because although this is clearly a remixed version of the Hoppo Wonder Effect section, this exact area with the 3 pits can't be found in the original level at all. That means these levels may be changed more substantially than the simple addition of talking flowers and coins. And obviously that's not to mention these cloud guys playing drums that drop coins, a hilarious enemy design that matches the original game's zany energy perfectly in my opinion. Even though this clip clearly takes place during this level's equivalent of a Wonder effect, it doesn't seem like that's technically what's active here. And in fact, apart from the buds, there isn't any Wonder stuff like seeds or flowers shown throughout this trailer. This clip is missing the normal wobbly screen corner effect displayed during Wonder effects, and instead features these blue flower particles that match designs seen all over this DLC. This King Boo scene shown towards the end of the trailer also seems to be a fast cash level. In the original game, King Boo only ever appeared during Wonder effects, but once again that doesn't seem to be what's going on here, though this new dynamic fog effect is extremely cool looking. It seems like the players enter this scene with King Boo asleep, but just like with the sleeping Goombas in the original game, popping King Boo's bubble wakes him up. This then seems to trigger a gimmick where the players have to stand still in order to avoid King Boo's cobweb attack. You can see Blue Toad and Peach strike a unique pose as they wait and continue unscathed, whereas Luigi and Red Yoshi, who keep moving, get punished by being stuck to a cobweb and losing 10 coins each. Apart from that gimmick, King Boo seems harmless in this section considering Peach walks right through him, which is actually consistent with the Cloud guys in the other clip. And in case it wasn't obvious, this is a remixed version of the original game's first level, but with added coins and without the checkpoint, talking flowers, and blocks. On the world map, the fast cash minigame is represented by a golden tent surrounded with coins and with a golden cloud icon on top. This could suggest that every level of this type will feature these drumming guys, though they only appear on the icon of the level we saw previously. There's also an icon for the King Boo level, and for wait, is that Rosalina? Yeah, as you've probably heard by now, it seems like one of the unannounced additions to this upgrade is a new playable character. With Nintendo's sudden focus on Super Mario Galaxy related stuff, it's not a huge surprise that Rosalina is joining the lineup. This could mean that other characters like Pauline or maybe Wario and Waluigi are being added, though nothing in this trailer suggests that. All the other course icons just feature the original cast. Anyways, she appears on an icon alongside Yoshi and a balloon with the number 10 on it in what looks to be a level that uses the original game's Coins Galore theme. I do hope that just because this diorama only has 3 icons and most others only have 1, that doesn't mean each mode is locked to such a limited amount of play areas. The knock 'em back mode can pretty much be boiled down to Super Smash Bros. Wonder, since the goal is to kill the other players as many times as possible in a small arena. It's a shame that they didn't bring back proper player collision for this mode. That would have increased the chaos tenfold, though using these new bubble blasters, which shoot out 3 bubbles at the same time and respawn periodically, still seems decently fun. Weirdly, instead of making the players hold these things like a shell or a POW block, they instead have wings and vaguely float around the player's position. This is likely to indicate that you don't have to keep a button pressed down to hold these, and it also would have looked weird to grab one of these big golden blasters otherwise. But I still think a proper animation would have looked better. I like these color-coded spark effects that indicate each player's death, by the way. I assume those are exclusive to this mode, since they also appear on its world map diorama. Here we can see that apart from the bubble blasters, the knock 'em back mode can also revolve around countdown platforms and these new electrified player pole objects. I have no idea how that one will work, but we get a look at the countdown platform variation later in the trailer. And hey, look, it's those same patterns again. The UI seems to be disabled in most of the trailer's early clips, but we get a look at it here. It looks like the players are divided up in teams in this particular session, which isn't something that was discussed in the trailer, so the kill count of the players is tallied collectively. At least, I assume that's what these Mario icons indicate, even if that's a bit of an odd choice. This clip also shows a collection of fire flowers spawning from a pot, which isn't something that happens in the original game. We can sort of see the 3 icons for this mode in this other shot of the world map, though we get to see the only clearly visible icon in full earlier in the trailer. And this is actually a pretty big deal, because it shows these slanted ramp semi-solids, which don't appear in the bubble blaster level we see in the trailer. So this basically confirms that at least some of the modes feature multiple levels. I can't glean much from these other icons that are covered up. This one features Daisy in a dark environment, and this one shows Peach, a roller Koopa, and a shoot block, which can also be seen on the world map. Oh, also, wait a second, that's Prince Florian walking around. He isn't visible on any of the player's shoulders during the minigame footage, so I assume he gets to do his own thing in this area. Moving on, the run-hide mode is very weird. It involves 2 players wearing Phanto masks from Super Mario Bros. 2 who must try to tag the other players with these ghost tongue attacks, and those players can hide by transforming into talking flowers. This Piranha Plant disco ball is from the original game, but these Phanto symbols it projects are new. And just like with the previous mode, the icon we get to see for it suggests that it'll feature multiple levels, since this terrain, this brick block, and this Phanto background decoration all don't appear in this clip. I hope that you get to hide as things other than talking flowers in the other levels, since the voiceover never specifies that you can only hide as a talking flower. Though either way, this is a very creative use of one of the original game's existing elements. This mode's world map diorama is nothing special, just a Phanto shrine basically, though what is noteworthy is that it appears in both the local and online multiplayer plazas. I suppose this makes sense because of the modes we've seen, this is the only one that doesn't really require the players to interact with or change the environment in any way, so that online quirk isn't relevant in this case. The Bob-omb Relay mode is the first cooperative one we're taking a look at. The objective is to bring a golden Bob-omb to the goal without it exploding by passing it from player to player, hot potato style. Although we don't get to see it count down, I assume this timer indicates how long the Bob-omb has left to blow, with it only triggering after a single player has held it for too long. It also seems like every time the Bob-omb is thrown, the game selects a player that has to pick it up next, likely to prevent two players from being able to pass it back and forth repeatedly. Both the imminently exploding Bob-omb and the successful pass are accentuated with these new talking flower effects at the edges of the screen. These resemble the type the original game triggered when collecting a superstar. This takes place in yet another variation of the game's first level, by the way, this time with the talking flowers, coins, enemies, and checkpoint removed. On the world map, the diorama for this mode features what looks like a big sand pit with a wind-up key and a fuse. We only get to see this one icon for it, but this once again confirms that the mode will feature multiple levels, since this is clearly a candy-themed area, and interestingly it also shows a cannon with fireworks. Build-Away Donut Block Maker might be the most unique mode we've seen yet, since it requires half of the players to use the switch to's mouse mode to place temporary donut blocks that the other players can use to progress. This is basically an evolution of New Super Mario Bros. U's Boost mode. The donut blocks are obviously color-coded, and it might be that the pairs of players take turns placing or walking across them, since in the first clip Daisy and Yoshi are the builders, whereas they're running around in the second clip, and it's Mario's and Yellow Toad's turn to place. Both of these shots also show something really curious, I think, which is that this DLC features some random remodels of the original game's assets. This triangular bouncy flower blob is clearly an edit of the original game's bouncy gear platform, and the same goes for these see-through flower boxes in comparison to the original game's checkerboard ones. I assume this was done to allow mechanics like the bouncy gear platform, which was originally specifically themed to match World 4, to work in any environment, giving the designers more freedom to mix and match gimmicks. This mode's world map diorama is quite interesting because it not only features a set of floating donut blocks, but also some more being carried by a hot air balloon of all things. I wonder if this thing will come into play in actual levels as well. And once again, the icon shows a previously unseen level theme for this mode. The 1, 2, 3 jump mode uses the mechanic that the original game introduced right at the last second before the final boss fight, where jumping to the beat causes the players to launch up with a wonder force field around them. This is a gimmick that I've always thought had more potential beyond its original usage, so I'm happy to see it make a comeback. I assume the reason you can't just stand and wait on this new propeller platform instead of interacting with the mode's gimmick is because it only moves up if you jump at the right time. And you'll want to keep moving up because this cool UI gizmo shows what I think is rising poison water that the players have to stay ahead of. Also, it's interesting how the level seems to turn nighttime right at the end of this clip. My guess is that this is to indicate that you're slowly leaving the atmosphere and the level ends with a space section. The world map diorama shows that the propeller platform isn't the only central gimmick of this mode, because it also shows a completely normal puffy lift. I think this variation of the mode might not revolve around strict timing, and instead just requires the players to jump at the same time to allow a puffy lift to grow repeatedly. Also, as per tradition at this point, the mode's icon shows a different level theme than the one we see in the footage. Alright, that's it for the multiplayer modes that were specifically highlighted in the trailer, but this Baby Yoshi clip gives us a peek at one more. The objective here seems simple enough: collect as many Yoshi apples as possible. The normal ones give you 2 points, this golden apple gives you 10, and presumably this purple one subtracts points instead. The baby Yoshis are color-coded to match each player, meaning this is sort of the first appearance of the pink and dark blue Yoshi variations in Wonder. This likely means that it's impossible for the players to let go of their baby Yoshis in this mode, or at least I don't see a reason why you'd want to. This section was once again taken from a World 1 level, Scram Skedaddlers, though this flower block and this cutout of a bush were added. I assume that bush is a reference to similar looking foliage that's grown Yoshi apples in previous games. The world map diorama for this mode is easily my favorite because look at that chonker of a baby Yoshi. I wonder if this type will actually come into play within the levels. Even though we don't get to see the other minigames in the trailer, we can see every diorama, so let's speculate about those. There's another mode that looks like it revolves around eating Yoshi apples, though this time with adult Yoshi. And not just normal apples, but also Goombas disguised as apples. This course icon even shows a golden variation that will probably once again yield more points. The most noteworthy thing about this mode is that I imagine it requires the players to either play as or ride Yoshis. I wonder how that will be handled logistically. We also get to see what looks basically identical to an enlarged version of a KO Arena diorama, with its course icon showing Blue Toad, a Goombrat, a Hoo-Hoo, and a Swirlypod. This mode can't just function like a normal KO Arena because it has to be competitive in some way, so I think it'll work by counting which player defeats the most enemies. In the co-op game area, one of the modes we don't get to see seems to revolve around yellow birds with Captain Toad-like scarves. In fact, this entire area seems to be Captain Toad themed. Some of the other dioramas show poplins performing the actions that players are supposed to do in the levels, so I assume the birds will carry the players around just like this poplin. My guess is that with the Captain Toad theming, maybe this minigame will revolve around players being unable to jump, and thus you have to rely on one of these birds to move vertically. Or maybe this is all just a reference to Wingo. The other local co-op game we don't get to see is the one that's represented by this poplin tower. Judging from these numbers, I assume counting will be involved, and maybe also stargazing? It's really hard to imagine how this game might function, though that's assuming this is a game at all. This door certainly makes it look like this diorama is enterable, so maybe this is some kind of special sub-area. If so, my guess is that this is the place that keeps track of high scores for each of the games. It would explain the number theming and also the poplin keeping a close eye on the other games. Like I mentioned earlier, we don't get to see any of the presumably online multiplayer levels in this trailer, but we do get a look at their dioramas. First of all, compared to the local multiplayer ones, I can't help but notice just how simple and uniform these are. Apart from the Phanto Shrine, they're each just the same pedestal with an animated asset placed on top. I think this could suggest that these modes don't necessarily each have a unique theme or objective. I think they may feature the same set of levels even. Like I explained previously, there's only so much you can do within Wonder's extremely limited online multiplayer system, so I assume most of these games are a race of some sort, just like in the original game. That would certainly make sense with roller skates, propeller flowers, and winged bullet bill vehicles. I imagine this appearing and disappearing green flower block game will revolve around players having to bridge large gaps with these blocks, kind of like the donut block game but automated instead of placed by other players. As for the bouncy ball, I don't know, maybe the developers managed to recreate some kind of real-life ball game, though if so, I have no idea why that wouldn't also be playable locally. Okay, before we move on from Bellabel Plaza to talk about the new single-player stuff, I want to talk about this shop for a second, because what does it sell? There's a map rolled out in front of the shopkeeper with a second one rolled up on the side. But I don't think you'll be buying maps. I think this is an indication of the fact that talking to this poplin will allow you to pick something from a map. Entering a minigame requires you to talk to a Poplin, and although in this wide shot we can see there's Poplin standing in front of every diorama, there's a few missing here. Also here we can see the DLC adds this additional blue water droplet looking currency, though we haven't seen anything like that in the actual levels. So my theory is that only some minigames will be unlocked at the start, but playing them gives you this currency, which you can then use to pick which minigames you want to unlock next at this shop. Though that doesn't explain why there's a racing wiggler sleeping up here, and why there's skates and a table. Maybe those are all just decorative. Anyways, there's also a talking flower here. Those never appeared on the world map in the original game, and there's what looks to be an amiibo related shop. Wonder never had any amiibo functionality originally, but it feels like Nintendo's been ramping up amiibo integration again more recently, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Switch 2 upgrade ends up launching with an overpriced Elephant Mario amiibo that gives you some in-game perks. Also, this shop is clearly supposed to look like a portable cart, so I assume it'll be placed throughout the rest of the game's world map as well. And speaking of the rest of the world, thankfully the DLC content extends beyond Bellabel Park, which is what the final seconds of the trailer give us a glimpse at. Though the first shot of this part of the trailer still seems to take place in the same area, judging from these mountains which also appear on the world map. Apart from this minigame clip, this is the only time we get to see a 2D representation of the Bellabel Park region, and the look of this terrain all but confirms its connection to the Pipe Rock Plateau swamp area, since that's clearly where this grass is from, whereas the ground texture looks a lot like that seen in the game's first few levels. These flowers, which emit bubbles, can actually be found throughout many of the trailer's clips, even in environments taken from the original game's levels. I assume they don't actually serve a purpose, and are just used as subtle indication that even these random level themes are still a part of Bellabel Park. But maybe they are significant in some way, since their bubbles even appear behind all of these talking flower segments. Right at the start of this clip, we can just barely see this wooden structure with metal beams running along the bottom, and I think it's safe to assume that this is a minecart track. Although it's rare, Mario games have featured minecart rides before, and since this area is all but confirmed to be deep underground, I suppose this may be a fitting way to enter this part of the world. Because that is what I assume this is, the entrance to Bellabel Park. Maybe this is even the DLC's opening cutscene. Perhaps going to Bellabel Park is what triggers the Koopaling campaign. Them hiding down here would be a good explanation as to why they weren't involved in the events of the original game. And yeah, as for the Koopalings, I never thought I'd say this after we were beaten over the head with them during the Wii and Wii U era, but I'm glad to see them return. I do kinda wish they'd been given updated designs to fit Wonder's art style, but as far as I can tell, they look nearly identical to their previous appearances here, to the point where their pose in this oversized clown car is clearly a reference to their appearance in New Super Mario Bros. 2. I think the reason they have a new clown car is because Bowser gets transformed into Castle Bowser alongside his own clown car at the start of the game, and it's broken by the end of the game. I wonder if this very unique design with the two-sided face and the big nose will come into play during a potential boss fight with these guys. Though he's had other tents before, this tent design for Captain Toad is also new. This flower-shaped sign here has what looks like a drawing of those yellow birds, further enforcing that connection. Although the size of the camera here is the same as it is during the original game, it goes back to the larger view like the rest of the trailer in this Piranha Plants on Parade scene. The coins in the background, including the purple 10 coin, are missing in this clip, so whatever's going on here isn't being applied to the vanilla level. And hello, it looks like alongside Captain Toad, this campaign will also introduce Captain Poplin. Anyways, the main event here is obviously Wendy doing something with a magic smoke animation that's very similar to the ones during the Bowser Jr. boss fights in the original game. I assume this means she'll have a Wonder transformation just like Junior. Though considering this is happening right at the start of the level, I think how this will play out is that she'll mess with the level in some kind of overarching way, and then you fight her at the very end and get a Bellabel flower as a reward. Because skipping ahead, that's what happens in this clip. Mario and the returning Prince Florian get a Bellabel flower with Captains Toad and Poplin cheering them on. Judging from the terrain and background, this takes place in either the level Pokepede Pass or Condarts Away, though this completely flat and empty terrain can't normally be found in either level. The fact that getting a Bellabel flower is treated just like getting a Royal Wonder Seed is in the original game makes me wonder if there will only be a few of these remix levels in each world. Considering there are 7 Koopalings and Wonder features 7 main worlds, it would make perfect sense for each one to take over a single level and for that to be it, though obviously I hope that the DLC is more substantial than that. And I suppose the fact that Captain Toad appears on the world map here in an area that isn't close to Piranha Plants on Parade suggests that multiple levels per world will be affected. What's interesting is that this clip was clearly recorded on a fresh save file, so the DLC won't just be post-game content. So maybe you can talk to Captain Toad in a variety of locations throughout each world at any point of your playthrough, and that then triggers one of these Koopaling cutscenes every time, which then leads to a remixed version of a nearby level. After all, this Pipe Rock Plateau Brigade tent seems to contain a Bellabel flower. And speaking of the tent, it's noticeably different from the more extravagant one we saw earlier. Whereas in this clip, where Mario talks to the Blue Toad Brigade member, we see the big tent represented in 3D. I suppose this is meant to be home base, whereas the smaller tents are the ones you'll find multiple of throughout the other worlds. Actually, where in the world are we here? It's clearly a Bellabel Park looking area, but doesn't match anything we can see throughout the rest of the trailer. This all but confirms that there's more to this world that we haven't seen yet. Maybe this darker grass area is where this path leads to. Also, who does this bag belong to? It features a Captain Poplin sticker that reads "Let's Go" and a blue flower icon, but I don't think it belongs to any of the Brigade characters because it seems way too big for them. This hat looks like Mario's Explorer hat from Odyssey, and both the red and blue coloring here would match him as well, so my guess is that maybe Mario will wear this oversized bag. That could be an excuse to make him unable to jump, just like Captain Toad, meaning maybe one of the level remix types will force us to play through the original game's levels without jumping. Anyways, that's all there is to analyze. I could speculate about these Poplin murals, or come up with plausible release dates for the DLC, but I think you'll agree that I've gone in depth enough already. So let's end this thing off with some personal thoughts on what's been shown, including the modding potential of all this. Adding a multiplayer-focused party game area to Super Mario Bros. Wonder wouldn't have been my first choice, nor was I expecting this to be the direction Nintendo was gonna go, as is clear from my now outdated predictions video. I was right about the fact that the developers were never gonna add brand new traditional levels to the game, New Super Luigi U style, but I was still hoping the game would be made more difficult somehow. And maybe the Koopaling campaign will do exactly that. We know very little about that aspect of the DLC so far, though the fact that it's been confirmed that there's more to be revealed is exciting. But as for Bellabel Park, it seems fun. I'm surprised by how many new unique assets and mechanics have been made for it, and the inclusion of an online-focused area is nice. However, this entire mode would have been the perfect excuse to just bite the bullet and program traditional online multiplayer into the game. Another thing I requested in that video. I suppose there's still a chance that that'll sort of be the case with the Switch 2's Game Share feature, but from my experience that wouldn't work amazingly well with precise platforming. So unless you can play the local minigames in single player with CPU poplins or something, I'll likely mostly stick to the online modes, which we know nothing about currently. And again, that's the exciting part. From the Koopaling transformations to the online minigames and Rosalina's inclusion, there's clearly still loads to be revealed at a later date. Which makes sense because this thing isn't coming out for another half a year or so, which is unusual as far as Nintendo DLC announcements go. In terms of modding, well, I've talked about this in a few videos now, but whether we're ever gonna be able to mess with this stuff depends entirely on the progress of Switch 2 homebrewing, which is something I know very little about. It could be that this will be possible by the time the DLC releases, but it's just as likely that Switch 2 modding won't be figured out for years to come. We'll just have to wait and see. When it does become possible, it should be relatively easy for us to port existing Switch 1 Wonder mods to the new edition, since Wonder's levels and overarching systems are incredibly modular. I also don't doubt that many of the new Bellabel Park mechanics would work just fine in normal levels, so it's fun to think about the possibility of making a level that uses bubble blasters or baby Yoshis. In the meantime, it would technically be possible to mimic some of what's been shown here in the Switch 1 version of the game using some janky modding techniques. I can think of ways of making a Smash Bros style arena minigame or a hide and seek one using just the original game's existing mechanics. Or I could recreate some of the new assets shown here. I could replace my custom balloons with this official version by recreating it. But apart from the novelty of recreating Switch 2 exclusive stuff on a previous console, I don't really see the point. So I think for now, as cool as all of this stuff is, Super Mario Bros. Wonder Switch 2 edition likely won't have much of an impact on my mods of the Switch 1 edition of the game. And yeah, that's it. This video is more than 10 times as long as the trailer it's based on, and in general this is by far the longest scripted video I've ever made. So please, if you enjoyed, consider leaving a like or comment about all the stuff I missed or your own theories, and of course maybe consider subscribing. I also have a public Discord server linked in the description, and if you want to watch my videos early, you can sign up for a YouTube channel membership. Thank you so much for watching, and bye bye!